Hey folks, it's Eric Lavallée for IONCINEMA.com. This week, the whole bunch of sales companies, production houses are preparing their packages for what's going to be a virtual edition of the Cannes film market. So there are a couple of projects that are certainly grabbing our attention. But before we jump into specific projects, we'll touch upon the biz. Kevin Jagernauth, how's your week been?
Good, busy.
Great. So yeah, let's touch upon the delayed Chris Nolan film. It feels as if this is the red tape, the gates, the golden gates to normal movie going season. What's the deal? Are we gonna find this in the end of July?
Well, Warner Brothers has shifted the film 2 more weeks, from July 17th to the 31st. In its place, they'll be releasing Inception on July 17th with a little teaser exclusive to that attached to the film. The interesting thing about this is, the New York Times revealed a little bit in the past couple days that internally at Warner Brothers, they have been leaning to just postponing the film. It's a huge investment for them. I think the budget's a couple $100 million. It's been reported elsewhere that to break even or make some kind of profit, they need, I think, something like 80% of global cinemas to be operating, which I'm not sure if we're even close to that right now. But the only reason they're sticking to trying to get the movie out this summer is they want to keep their golden boy, Christopher Nolan, happy. So right now it's July 31st. So we're about a month and a half away. But I don't know. I mean, we don't even know. I mean, we're in Canada. We don't even know when the chains here are going to be open for business. I mean, what are your thoughts on getting back to the multiplex?
I think they need at least a 2-3 week buffer zone to make future patrons feel safe, to sort of like figure out the space, to figure out how operationally it'll occur. So I think a lot of business owners that do have four walls are probably in the midst of trying to figure out how do they accommodate even half the audiences. And I think the public are going to go into this human guinea pig experience in the same sort of mindset, meaning safety first, and not really playing it by ear, but having, fully fledged perimeters in place. I think it's almost a good thing because they got to test the waters a little bit before actually testing the waters with this major title.
Yeah, it'll certainly be an interesting experiment and a challenge for sure to see if cinemas can do this, if people can feel safe, and if it's even profitable for them. The big challenge for them, I think, is going to still be getting people out of the house feeling safe when they can just stay home and watch Netflix, who are still in the game. They have tons of stuff and sort of in the background they're waiting to release. One of them, as we both know, is David Fincher's Mank, which seems to have a release date now.
I mean, Eric Roth, there's a lot of these side interviews that are being done. I forget what the context was, but he did spill the beans. And the word is that Netflix would be dating this for an October release, which puts us in a really interesting position because we're thinking back to the news of that Ann Thompson sort of like shelled out, saying that Netflix was bypassing the film festival circuit altogether, which might still be the case. But if Fincher wants to have some sort of premiere, or maybe a New York Film Fest premiere, I guess there's a strong possibility that we might get a 2-week play or something at one of their theaters, or actually at a major film festival. What are your thoughts on it possibly arriving earlier at Telluride or Venice?
I think, like, I personally don't see it happening. I think it's a major signal already that the upcoming Cannes Film Festival, even in its virtual form, doesn't have a Netflix presence. And I think, yeah, it's true, they could change their minds. But I think with everything happening right now, in terms of, again, like protocols, people feeling safe, all of that kind of thing, I think I see a premiere more happening at one of the Netflix-owned cinemas in New York or LA, where they can control control how patrons are spread out, and also just invite the press they want. Again, I think part of this for Netflix is being able to really control the narrative that they want around their films this year. So yeah, we could certainly still see some sort of theatrical premiere or theatrical run at one of the Netflix cinemas, but I think most of us will be hitting a stream stream in October to watch this film.
I feel as if they need all the help that they can get. Sure, Fincher is a brand of it on his own. He's, with Nolan, I think people are curious to see what he does next. But this is kind of like when the Coen brothers went black and white with Billy Bob Thornton in 2001. It's a black and white film. Of course, it's a popular figure. There's a no, I think everybody who's seen Orson Welles' classic, there's definitely some curiosity here, but it's a 1930s techni non-colored dream.
Mm.
I think a film festival presence at least is obligatory.
Maybe, but again, David Fincher has never really particularly been a film festival guy. I mean, he kind of like Soderbergh, he moves comfortably between television and film. I think it's sort of like a nice to have. If he could do it, he could do it. But I also feel he's a kind of filmmaker who's very adaptable to the time. And if this film is going to be seen in most people's homes for the first time on their television, I think he's okay with it. I mean, I feel like him and Soderbergh have that kind of kinship where for them the process is the big thing for them, the sort of the making of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, I think however it gets out into the world, he's happy with. That being said, I feel that I do see where you're coming from. This is a movie about the movies. It does have, from what we know, a certain stylization to it that we probably will not have seen before from Fincher. So, I mean, I think both you and I would love to see this, preferably on any screen that's bigger than our televisions. But I will not be surprised if Netflix sticks to its guns and says, we'll put it in New York and LA on our screens that we own, but other than that, we're fine skipping the festival circuit. And then, I mean, for all we know, Toronto could be virtual. I know Telluride's still sticking to some sort of form of a physical fest, but all of that goes out the window if there's another uptick in infections and things.
It's going to be so complicated with watermarks on personal copies, and it's a logistical nightmare in my books. Let's move on to the Oscars this week. I imagine that they would have been more clear with what's happening with 2021, but they were more clear with what's happening with 2022. If you can give us the lowdown on sort of some of the activities that, or the major points that were brought about.
Well, there's one thing we know and one thing we don't know. The one thing we don't know is when the Oscars for 2021 will take place. I think everyone assumes by this point that it will be pushed back, but we still don't know. The Academy hasn't said anything. The one thing we do know is that for 2022, they're going to be returning to a 10-strong list of Best Picture nominees. And they are going to be working in some rules about inclusion requirements in some of the categories. Again, this hasn't been spelled out, but the BAFTAs, I believe, do something similar for a couple of their categories. I believe Best Feature and Best, I'm going to get this wrong, so I'm not going to guess, but they have a couple categories where they do this already. So it's a step in the right direction, definitely, in terms of inclusion. And in terms of a 10-strong list, I'm all for it. I think it's just an opportunity to include, for me, the Oscars are never about who wins. Like, it's always this weird political thing, and I don't, or it's a weird mix of like political and popular thing, and it doesn't really mean anything. The things that win are usually not the best anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, it's an opportunity. The Oscars are an opportunity for films to get onto into the popular conversation. So smaller films like I don't know, like A Serious Man, Up in the Air, just smaller films that wouldn't normally maybe get the attention in the Oscar race, have that space to sort of sneak in and get some kudos.
So you mentioned two titles from the 2009 edition. That's when they first introduced the 10 slot. And just to go back and read them off, it's we had The Hurt Locker, Avatar, The Blind Side, District 9, and Education, Glorious Bastards, Precious, A Serious Man, Up and Up in the Air. So definitely there's a lot of place for some indie spirit type love. But what this category might do is include a film like Parasite, which cleaned up last year, but normally we wouldn't see any foreign film language entities. So perhaps they'll champion again 1 degree of separation from Hollywood and go into the world cinema stratosphere. I'm really encouraged by setting it at 10. I think it does put the spotlight on at least 2-3 titles that normally would not get a lot of the attention or buzz, and I'm quite encouraged by the governing board. It's a big vote, and there's actually I had fun looking at the names of those that didn't get the bump up, but Ava DuVernay and Lynette Howell Taylor, who produced the Oscars last year, but she's also produced films like Blue Valentine. But there's a stronger female presence, so so yeah, it makes for a more woke future editions. Definitely Oscars less white, and I'm totally for that. So I guess we'll have to wait and see if 2021 does get pushed back or gets canceled altogether, and then we have a true horse race in 2022. Moving on from Oscars not so white anymore to Peter Farrelly, who gave us the Green Book a couple of years back. I think it was 2019. This week it was announced that he's joining teams once again with Viggo. Viggo is looking at a supporting role in a film that's based on a book and true life story. So yeah, it's called the project so far is untitled, but it's based on a book called The Greatest Beer Run Ever: A True Story of Friendship Stronger Than War. There's a lot to sort of like break apart here, but I only thought that films or people that went back to Nam were Chuck Norris, and they weren't necessarily looking to drop a cold case of beer amongst friends. So what are your initial impressions of this project, which is based on a rather crazy story to begin with?
Yeah, I mean, clearly Peter Farrelly and Viggo Mortensen had, reception of the film aside, they had a lot of success both at the box office and in terms of awards and things like that with Green Book. So I think it's pretty natural that they would reteam. Um, and it says a lot about what Viggo Mortensen thinks about the project,
Mhm.
given that he doesn't, he's very choosy. He doesn't star in a lot of things. He's also turned to directing. He was just at Sundance with, it's called The Falling, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it seems like they're eager to maybe go back down the awards route again. It'll be interesting to see what this movie has to say about Vietnam. I mean, Spike Lee just dropped To Five Bloods um, over the weekend at Netflix, and Richard Linklater just recently revisited that territory as well. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what Peter Farrelly, who still is probably more known for Dumb and Dumber, has to say about Vietnam, or if he's even going to say anything about it, or focus on the sort of friendship story in the middle of this.
Well, the production company, they focus mainly on films with bullets. Looking back at their recent slate, and it's like G.I. Joe and Jack Ryan's and that type. So I think there might be certain explosive elements to this. I mean, in one in I guess we can call this just another road trip, just the most bizarre road trip. I was looking back at the source material. So it's based on a book that was actually published recently in 2017, and the author, his name is Donahue, that's his last name, but he's known as Chicky. Um, he would go to these bars and sort of like dispel or tell the story, a true story of how he left in New York to go and find his pals. And I mean, he went into like a danger zone to deliver some brewskis. Jake Gyllenhaal's Nine Stories production company that have packaged this. He produces with a producer named Riva Marker, and Jake he's been he's been producing material for him to act in, but he's also been doing other things as well. Relic and Campos's Devil All the Time are some of the more recent projects. So this team's he'll appear in a film that sort of feels sort of like um, it's based on a graphic novel by a guy named Ollie Masters, and this will be directed by Gustav Möller. Now, Gustav Möller appeared at Sundance and Rotterdam a couple of years back with his first feature film called The Guilty, and that was a great chamber piece, a psychological thriller that really does not take place outside this call center. Magnolia probably made a good chunk of change with this. I believe it's on Netflix as we speak. So it's packaged with this Swedish filmmaker, I believe, or at least Scandi filmmaker. And yeah, it's based on a graphic novel. So how they're pitching it, they pitch it as a Prisoners Meets Running on Empty. And reading into it, it focuses on a teenager finds out his parents are in the witness protection program, and sort of like the comic, I think, looks at how he sort of investigates um, the true nature of his parents. So maybe perhaps Jake would actually play the father character in this project.
So another interesting side note to this project is that actually Jake Gyllenhaal and Gustav Mahler, they first connected over The Guilty. Shortly after that film came out, Gyllenhaal signed up to star in the remake, which which presumably is still in development, but with Gustav Mahler executive producing.
Okay.
So it seems that they clearly want to work together on something, and it seems like that remake idea has turned into, let's do something maybe original together instead of going over territory that's been gone over already. So a fruitful thing. I mean, it's nice. Jake Gyllenhaal's always sort of gone out of his way to find auteurs to work with. So it's exciting that he's giving his stamp here to this filmmaker.
Yeah, I'm curious as to. I was thinking back to like, there's a lot of these thriller element films that feature, the Scandi backdrop, and certainly could play to the filmmaker's strengths. I mean, just being in that backdrop, I imagine that he might have firsthand knowledge as to how to visually populate a film that essentially takes place indoors as well. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing if this actually becomes a sophomore project, but it's pretty big news for Gustav. It was announced that a project called Run Rabbit Run, which has nothing to do with the Tom Tykwer's film, is going to set Elisabeth Moss and in the driver's seat, if you will, with The Handmaid's Tale director Daina Reid. And this is an Australian thriller. So I think there's something happening right now is a lot of film production teams might be looking at filming in COVID-friendly production zones. And Australia appears to be one of those things. So yeah, what are your initial thoughts about another Elisabeth Moss film, sort of a package where, we get a sense it's a smaller project. She does have leanings towards independent cinema. So what do you think about her getting behind another relatively new filmmaker?
I think the thing that stands out for me with this project is that it's it's Elisabeth Moss returning down under, essentially. I mean, she went there initially for Top of the Lake quite a few years ago and had great success with that project on TV. So it's a return. I mean, that was a New Zealand production, but so yeah, she's going back to Australia, and maybe we'll have similar success here for what sounds like something that might be in the same vein, a bit enigmatic, a thriller. Yeah, so I mean, Elisabeth Moss is always she's done a really she's carved out a career between starring in blockbusters like The Invisible Man, doing TV work, and now and also doing stuff like films with Alex Ross Perry. So yeah, it's exciting. I mean, it's cool that she's following the material, not always where the dollar signs are.
That's well said. And so this is a modern day ghost story, and she's a fertility doctor, and sort of like she's being put in the position where she has to fend off and protect her younger daughter named Mia. So there's going to be some major casting news with concerns to the child actor actress, and going, we're called IndieSponge. That's for a reason. There's a small project that's been sort of like gaining traction. It was announced perhaps a year ago that one of my favorite actresses of the moment, Andrea Riseborough, was attaching herself to a project. It's called To Leslie, and this week we have John Hawkes and Allison Janney joining this project, which sounds like a rags to riches to something else. And it's based on a true story. Kevin, what's the lowdown on To Leslie?
So this film will tell the story of a single mom in Texas who wins the lottery, squanders it, and then years later sort of has to start like rebuilding her life again. So I agree with you. Andrea Riseborough is one of those actresses that she'll choose something to do, and so you sort of immediately know you're going to have to watch it because she's always that good, and she's always so transformative. It's remarkable, her range, and I think she's actually fairly underrated still, given her performances and what she's able to do. So that alone is exciting. And I mean, you couldn't ask for two better actors to join her who are just veterans and just always going to be a solid foundation to work with in John Hawkes and Allison Janney.
Does feel a little bit white trashy, which for those who did see the film Burden, she had a bit role in that. Perhaps it harkens back to that, but you know, we've seen her disheveled in Nancy. We've seen her sort of like in a different zone in Panos Cosmatos' Mandy, and for me, that was a major breakout role for her. I mean, at least turning a new page and allowing a lot of indie filmmakers to go and request her services. She recently was at Sundance with Possessor and Luxor, and so yeah, I'm just like enamored by these choices and, you know, who she goes to bat for. In this case, it's a filmmaker named Michael Morris, who's done actually only TV work, most recently with Better Call Saul. And it comes from a place that's really connected to the screenwriter. The screenwriter was actually the child in a situation that we'll see in this film, meaning he saw his mom go through this conflict with her relationships, but also with money and a different lifestyle. So it's going to be something that feels authentic. I can only imagine what it might sound like or look like on paper. But yeah, To Leslie is something that I wouldn't be surprised if we see at a Sundance maybe in 2022.
Couldn't have said it better. I think so. That'll be one to watch for sure as it develops and hopefully is able to shoot once it works around this COVID situation.
Yeah, I think it would be safe to say that a project like that might start shooting in the later stages of the summer. So yeah, To Leslie with three pretty solid actors. It's something that I'm looking forward to. And that's that for this week. Next week, we should be seeing a lot more Cannes-related packaging of films. So, yeah, bigger actors and definitely dollar-wise heftier projects put together.
See you next week.
Take care, guys. Hi, I'm Eric Lavallée. I'm editor-in-chief and site owner for IONCINEMA.com, and this is
Kevin Jagernauth, contributing writer for the playlist.
And together we are IndieSponge.